Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to look at some of the advanced security management features for anonymous forms. As you might already be aware, anonymous form feature is used by application designers to create customer-facing applications and expose them to the users outside your organization boundary without having to create separate login IDs for each one of them. However, since these forms are accessible outside the organization boundary, very strict security control is desired. A lot of these security features like two-factor authentication, firewall configuration, allowed IP address range, tokenized URLs using encryption were already present for this feature from day one. However, we are taking it one step further and allow app designers to specifically whitelist APIs which can be called using this external token. Let's look at this feature in action. So I'm on my portal. I'm going to open my application called Anonymous Access Security. It has only one anonymous task right now. So it has an anonymous stat task. So I'm going to go ahead and double click this. And I'll go to the anonymous access configuration window. So as you can see over here, I can give it a nice looking name. So I'm going to just call it demo. I'm going to select my access token. This access token is nothing but where you specify what service account should be used to submit the form on behalf of the user. This information is not accessible to the user. He cannot see all these credentials. This is only known on the server side. This is the system service account which is being used. One thing we highly recommend is that keep this as a least privileged user. Do not give this user a lot of permissions which you do not need on your forms outside of your organization boundary. So once I have that, I can switch on to the URL tab. I can pass in extra parameters in my URL and pre-populate them on the form. I can specify the firewall configuration as well. So I can click on generate, and at this point of time it gives me a secure link. As you can see, it is not using any username password. It gives me a link with a randomized token, and this is specific to a particular application and a particular step, and that is actually sent out. And when this token is sent to the Agile Point server, only Agile Point server knows how to read this token and translate it into a form submission. Now, if this was for an anonymous stat task, this is a step where the user has not submitted the form. I don't know his identity at this point of time. So you see these options. In an anonymous standard task, which is used somewhere in middle of the process, where you can send a task to an anonymous user to provide some additional information. By that time, you have already established his identity in a way. You might have asked for his email ID on the initial form. So if you know that information, you have an extra option which shows up, which I'm going to show you over here. I'm going to cancel out of this. So you have an extra option which is on the anonymous standard task. And if I go over here and select anonymous access configuration, I can also enable multi-factor authentication. So what it does is, if you enable this feature, it's when the user clicks on the task link, it asks user for it mails a 6-digit code, security code to user's email, and before he can open the form, he has to enter that 6-digit code. So that is available on the stat task already. So all these features already existed in the product. Now what we have done with the latest release, which is Agile Point NX version 8.0, we have added a new feature that you can also restrict a set of APIs. So let me just fill this part again, and I'm going to select my access token. I'm going to leave the URL and firewall the same, but now you can specifically restrict APIs which can be called using this access token. So even if somebody got hold of this access token, the encrypted access token which was there in the URL and kind of read through the headers and then tried to copy it, he cannot misuse those to make extra API calls which were not allowed for this particular form. So if you just go ahead and check enable API whitelisting, now you can check show all APIs as well at this point of time. So what happens is there are some bare minimum APIs the eForm would require, which are already added to the grid. So as you can see, these are the ones which the form would require, any form would require to be rendered. So those are there. You cannot delete those. But then you can just say start capturing. What it does is it opens the eForm in a preview window, and all the APIs on the form you might have certain lookups, certain APIs being fired. It captures all of that information. So you can just open the form, you can run through the form rules like various buttons. So for example, in my form, this is connecting to a data entity API to pre-populate this form. Also, there's a people picker on my form, which is making a call back to the people picker API. And I have a couple of buttons which I have knowingly kept as disabled. So these are not supposed to be called by the user. I'm just going to simulate a user trying to manipulate this later on in my demo. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, this looks good. I've navigated through all the rules on my form. I go back and I say stop capturing. At this point of time, if you scroll down, so the bare minimum APIs are there, which is read only, but then it also captured what form specific APIs were being used as part of my form logic. So if you see, I had a binding to a data entity. My subform was bound to a data entity. I was also using people picker. So those are over here. I can add extra APIs if I wanted. And I'm going to say this looks good. Generate an access token. I'm going to just copy it to my clipboard and click save. So at this point of time, my access token is generated, and only these APIs can be called using this access token. As I said, this is an advanced configuration. So click finish. I'm going to say yes, this looks good. I'm going to select the application and publish it. I'm going to check in the files and hit publish. Okay. Next, I'm going to open that anonymous URL over here. So as you can see, the form got rendered. My allowed API, which was the read values from data entity, got triggered. Also, my people picker is working over here as well. So the APIs I allowed, they are working in an unrestricted mode. Now let's take an example where user tries to tamper with the form and tries to call an API which he was not allowed to use. Now, this is not just limited to the form. If he would have captured the header somewhere and then tried to make it through a fiddler or maybe some code, it would still be blocked in the same way. So anyways, even previously, he was not able to make a direct call to the Agile Point server using that header. So that was anyways blocked, but we have added this advanced security as well. So let's go ahead and say, I want to enable this button. Though it was not supposed to be enabled, I'm going to get in this one and I'm going to enable this one. So I am trying to tamper with my form. So if I get back, I see that now this button is enabled. So it's a malicious user who tried to do certain things. Obviously, you would not usually create this kind of a form with buttons which can be tampered with. But just to simulate the extra API call, I use this kind of a scenario. I'm going to go ahead and click this button. And it tells me I do not have permission to access some of the features on the current form. So it was blocked. That API was blocked. And it asks me to contact the system administrator. So as you can see, it restricted the API calls to the only the ones which have been whitelisted. So it's an advanced security feature for anonymous form users. Thanks a lot for your time.